Oh, the fans are going to love this. All right, fans, welcome back to Chaos Corner here on Guardian of Chaos, the YouTube channel, coming to you live to tape 25 feet below the surface of the Earth. I'm live. But I am taping this. Nah, fuck it. You guys get the idea. You get the gist. We go through this every time. Here for part 2 of Wrestler's Court. There's just one problem. Story time with the GOC. That's me. Go back and check out part 1. Full of chicanery and laughs and parody, but actual facts, and that's why you're here. One man, unique, unedited, unscripted, raw dog for you, the fans. Reading from Brian Gewirtz, former WWE writer, fascinating and hilarious. And there's just one problem. We're going to go back to Wrestler's Court here on Storytime. I can't thank you guys enough for being here. I greatly appreciate it. I've been trying to tune up, as you saw on part 1, and get in rhythm here with the ukulele. So bear with me here before I get back to Wrestler's Court. Part 2, there's just one problem. Kaylee Kaliki Maka means I love you too. Kaylee Kaliki Maka. A big shout out to the High Paramount Chief Peter Maivia and the ukulele. Pehe Aoi Melahini Kane and Wahinis. Pupule Wiki Wiki. Aloha and mahalo. All right, let's get back into it, fans. Enough of the chicanery from the first segment. And now we're here on part 2, Wrestler's Court, story time with the GOC. And I know I'm repeating myself. That's what I do. That's why you guys are here. Check out part 1, as I said, and we'll get back to part 2. There's just one problem. Wrestler's Court. Remember the date. We're going forward to go back here in a time machine on Chaos Corner. 1999, 2000, 2001, 2002, as we're currently in 2024. Stay mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually fit in this day and age, and the craziness and insanity that's going on in this world, from the environment to border invasions to wars to the economy. And I mean that. That's a shoot. A shout out to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, because as He's for us, no one else can be against us. And that's the truth. So I want to put that statement out there. You guys know how I feel about all this. But we're here for a much-needed distraction. Not only for you, but for me as well. Shout out to all my fans, followers, and subscribers. Over 3,000 videos on the channel. Go to my community page. You can stay updated in real time. Over 500,000 total views now. Last week we had almost 30,000 viewers. Because in order to get respect, you have to start with respecting yourself. Once you do that, you open other people's minds to respecting you. Drop an elbow on that like button. Share, subscribe. Leave a comment, inbox me, email me. Follow me on all social media platforms. Not only here on the mothership, the Guardian of Chaos YouTube channel. Hit me up on X in real time. At Big Daddy GOC. And the GOC stands for the Guardian of Chaos. On Instagram, it's the Guardian of Chaos. On Facebook, I have 2 accounts. That's right, I have 2 for promotional reasons. J Brony. That's right, J Brony. Just like it sounds for all you jabronis that have the brain of a dehydrated BB out there. And of course, in honor of my heritage, Prodigio Fidelis El Guardian. Let me say it again. Prodigio Fidelis El Guardian. Follow me on Gitter, Gab, Truth Social, Rumble. I cover it all in the IWC. For you, the fans. Back to Wrestler's Court. There's just one problem. I love saying that. As I surveyed the crowd, the de facto jury, I noticed one person who should not have been there. His presence immediately set me off. Jamie Morris was a writer who was hired about 6 months after I started. I didn't have anything against him personally, but seeing an actual fellow writer there settling in to enjoy the slaughter and actually eating popcorn years before all the memes was something I couldn't accept. I immediately went to Stephanie and told her to point blank, Jamie can't be there. Literally every other person was fine, but not him. I had no idea what was in store, but I wasn't going to have another writer smirking at me in every writer's meeting going forward, telling every new writer this story behind my back. Something about his face in the moment truly incensed me. I was actually prepared to talk out and quit. Had Steph said, too bad, I honestly would have grabbed my bags and left the WWE for good right then and there. That was how much his presence triggered me. Like all you libtards out there, no offense, man, lighten up and kayfabe, man, it's a joke. That was how much was his presence triggered me, as I just said. Stephanie must have seen the crazed look in my eyes because moments later she was pulling Jamie aside and escorting him out of the room. A gesture I'll always appreciate. With the first win under my belt, I took a deep breath and prepared to face the music to quote Brian Gewirtz, the WWE writer. Edge and Christian were already in the defendant's box. 3 chairs set up next to the Undertaker's judge table, where I joined them. Sitting in front of the room, facing the entire roster. To our far right was the prosecutor, John Bradshaw Layfield, one of the loudest, most bombastic, and toughest guys in the entire locker room. Just ask him. Bradshaw was pure Texas bravado, standing 6'5", 275 pounds. Of all the officers in the court, he would be considered the small one. Behind us was the bailiff, Glenn Jacobs, otherwise known as the Big Red Monster, Kane. He wasn't wearing his iconic Kane mask, but with a stoic look and folded arms, he made an intimidating presence nonetheless. I believe his job was to make sure no one physically attacked us. Okay. Or at least attacked Brian, the writer. Finally, directly to our right, the judge, the Undertaker. It made sense he was the most tenured and respected man in the locker room. Remember the circumstance, late 90s, early 2000s. I don't think they have a locker room wrestler's court anymore. Bunch of soft motherfuckers in today's business. What no respect? What'd I say? He also was the one top guy. I had never really interacted with much, as behind the scenes, he typically worked with veterans Bruce Pritchard or Michael Hayes. I could feel my heart rate rising as I turned to Edge and Christian, who seemed oddly calm. You know why, Gewirtz? Because you weren't one of the boys. Don't you get it? You were a writer. Did you ever get in a ring and take a fucking bump? Huh? Have you? That's the difference. You didn't even belong there in Wrestler's Court. But I get it, Brian. I get it. To compound matters, sitting in the front row directly across from me was Triple H. When I at least had a cordial relationship with Bradshaw, Kane, and Taker, Triple H truly did not think I had any business being in a backstage position of power at the time. I agree with that, and he wasn't alone. There was a guy who looked up to tough, take-no-shit legends like Killer Kowalski, the man who trained him, and Harley Race. I was the guy who owned the best of Match Game on DVD. I was often seen in catering eating Fruit Loops. Yeah, well, I get it, Brian. And despite having no wrestling experience, which I just said, inexplicably had Vince McMahon's ear. To Triple H, my main function seemed to be finding unique and unprintable ways for guys like The Rock, probably my biggest ally, and absent from the trials he had left to shoot the Scorpion King after Raw the night before. And Chris Jericho to make fun of him, and his on-screen and soon-to-be actual wife, Stephanie McMahon. We're talking about Triple H, if you're paying along. Hello? McFly? Anyone? Bueller? Stephanie McMahon, months earlier, when Vince came up with the idea of having Triple H lose to the Brooklyn Brawler in a 3-on-1 handicap match, Triple H stormed into the production meeting, looked me in the eye, and said, "This had to be you." Now, he was looking at the single box of pizza and 6-pack of beer I had embarrassingly stuffed under my chair and shaking his head in disgust. Undertaker brought the court in session as Bradshaw laid out the charges. We were being accused of giving and accepting gifts in exchange for television airtime. Edge and Christian pleaded not guilty to the charges, and then it was my turn. Bradshaw asked, "How do you plead, Mr. Gewirtz?" A nice Italian boy? No? John was no dummy. He knew it was a pet peeve of mine when someone mispronounced my name, which happened 90% of the time, and I'm doing it here on purpose, Gerwitz. It set me off like calling Marty McFly chicken. How ironic when I mentioned hello, McFly all the time, and now it's in the book. People are listening and stealing my stuff, you know that, right? Not that I give a fuck, because I don't. I apologize for the cussing once again. It just happens. I don't need to get over it. It flies out of my mouth. I really don't mean it. I repent, but I can't keep making the same mistakes. Fuck it. Bradshaw had laid the first trap baiting me. Would I take the high ground and ignore it? Or would I come out of the gate swinging and wow everyone with my courage? My last name is pronounced Gewirtz, whatever. I don't know. So if you're going to proceed with this sham of a trial, the least you can do is get my name right. The crowd instantly leapt to their feet. Many oohed and some ahed, and all were impressed with my sheer chutzpah. Chutzpah. Actually, none of that is true. Instead, there was only dead, soul-crushing silence. As I waited for the slow clap that never came, Undertaker cocked his head and turned with a look, and that said, "The fuck did you just say?" "That's not me cussing, that's the Undertaker." Even the ever-silent Kane managed to utter a, "Oh boy," under his breath. Bradshaw turned his attention back to Edge and Christian, who once again seemed to be having the time of their lives. Christian said, "Not only are we not guilty, we have an announcement. A lot of the talent have been getting book deals. We probably should just tell you now, so you're not surprised when you find out. But because of the stuff we're doing on TV, we've received a book deal too." I had no idea what they were talking about, but I could see the natives getting very restless. It was bad enough these guys were taking their spots, but now, after being on the company for less than 3 years, they were getting a book deal? Triple H, who decidedly did not have a book deal, looked like he legitimately wanted to kill someone. Even more so than usual trips. Papa H, for all you dick riders. Oh, I don't mean to say that, riders. Lighten up! It's a joke, man. Kayfabe. I'm in rare form today, can you tell? Edge reached into a bag and produced an oversized book, Edge and Christian, How to Kiss Ass or Road Trip to the Top. Our road trip to the top. They were both photoshopped on the cover, sporting the cheesiest, shitty grins imaginable. There were moments of confused silence and then uproarious laughter. No wonder they looked so calm. They had been tipped off. No way they could have made the look in less than an hour, or that book. And now, unlike me, they had shown the crowd on their side, and clearly the boys were on their side. They went with, "We're going to be found guilty no matter what we do. So we might as well have some fun and entertain the boys." They went that route. A route they didn't clue Gewirtz in on. Maybe I should have been more vocal about stopping a segment where Big Show and Rikishi rubbed their asses in Edge and Christian's face months earlier. Live and learn, I say, with the old stink face. Can you smell it? With Edge and Christian seemingly in the court's good graces, Prosecutor Bradshaw turned his attention back to me and called upon a number of wrestlers to testify as character witnesses. He essentially wanted to know, would I be the type of a guy to favor Edge and Christian and or blatantly violate locker room rules? Taz, the co-host of Sunday Night Heat, produced a WWF New York, the company's one-time restaurant in Times Square, was asked whether I had bothered to show up to produce the show. Once, Taz replied. And who were the hosts of that particular episode, Bradshaw asked. Edge and Christian, I replied. Or Taz replied. He was right. It didn't stop me from tossing my new orange Taz shirt directly in the trash the next day when I got home, but technically it was true. Jamie Morris was the main producer of Heat. He wanted to produce it and consider it his baby, but was on vacation the week that Edge and Christian hosted there from WWF New York, which I had been to several times back then. What a place, what a concept, what a time, man. If only he was here, he could explain. Oh, right. Perry Saturn, who in the past was not happy when he heard I supplied The Rock with a joke about his crossed eyes, was called on next. I've been in the company for 427 days, he said. And hello, 236 of those days, but only shook my hand 139 of those days. And one time he went into a room and didn't shake my hand or nothing even. How about that? Let that marinate. I'm paraphrasing, but you get the idea, right? There were a bunch of times I had greeted wrestlers but didn't actually shake their hands. That was actually a big no-no. I didn't realize it when I first started, but shaking hands is a very big deal in the locker room. It was an issue that would rear its head an even bigger way later in the trial. Well, me personally, I fist bump, because I don't know if you were picking your nose, scratching your ass, scratching your nuts, scratching your old lady's gas. I don't know what you were doing. No offense, man. I'm not trying to offend anybody. A fist bump. I learned that in the prison for 25 years. Sanitary, man. Come on. Hygiene. It's still respect. What? Let me not get off track here. As an aside, while Perry, a great guy, had several gimmicks over his career, many WWE fans knew him as the non-sequitur spewing, mop-loving character who'd randomly say, "You're welcome," at the end of every promo. At every sentence. There was a widespread belief that this gimmick was punishment for Perry after he roughed up another wrestler in the ring after a botched move weeks earlier. Neither of those things are correct. It had nothing to do with the incident, and it wasn't done as punishment. That character came about as a result of me imitating Perry's testimony to my friends, which each account getting more and more ridiculous as this show is, and then actually trying a version of it on the air. Perry had been treading water as a singles wrestler at the time, and I thought he could make this new character work. Perry was actually super entertaining in this new role, and people genuinely enjoyed him. It even took a strange turn in real life. Perry thought we, the office, were messing with him, so he decided to mess with us. Outside the ring, he took Moppy, if you remember the gimmick over 20 years ago. Most of you guys were just a gleam in your daddy's eyes. I get it. My demographic here, the biggest demographic is, I think 24 to 35. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. I appreciate it, man. That means I connect with everybody. Men, women, any age, all ages. He took Moppy with him everywhere, restaurants, hotels, flights, as if he and the mop were an actual couple. But I'm getting ahead of myself, and at the time, it didn't take much to decipher Perry's problems. And what was once a case of simple gift acceptance was now turning into a full-on character assassination. Not only was I favoring my friends, but I was big-leaguing everyone else. Even I was starting to think I was an asshole. In reality, my general shyness almost always stopped me from making the first move. Not just in backstage handshaking, but pretty much everything. Still, in WWE, perception is reality. And it doesn't matter if it was a case of an introvert awash in a sea of extroverts with healthy egos. The perception was that Hollywood boy didn't have time for anyone but his friends. This was about to turn into a company-wide burial, and with that I saw Sean Waltman, X-Pac, rise from his chair. Even though Sean was only a year older than me, and even though I was there at the Manhattan Center for Raw in 1993, cheering as loud as anyone when he was the 1-2-3 kid as he beat Razor Ramon in one of the biggest upsets in WWE history. I rubbed him the wrong way almost immediately. Not only did I never work with him on promos, but usually I was writing the material when wrestlers were making fun of him. I also didn't recognize Les Thatcher, once backstage in catering. Les is a wrestling legend and someone Sean deeply respects and admires, so his anger was justifiable. One time when I wandered into the male talent locker room, Sean shouted my name and said, "What are you doing in here?" The sign on the door says talent. Listen up to all you people that try to get backstage that aren't talent. That was our relationship in a nutshell. I don't actually remember specifically what X-Pac said, but he was so livid he actually left his seat and headed toward me before Kane stepped in to stop a full-fledged riot from breaking out. All I remember was him spewing a bevy of profanity and the tension in the room growing to such uncomfortable levels, I was hoping for Bradshaw to call upon literally anyone else. The good news is he did. The bad news? It was Hardcore Holly. Bob provided the eyewitness testimony of the incident in question. That Flash action figure went from Edge's hands to mine, where it was received warmly. I blurred out that while I did take the figure, it had nothing to do with who goes on television. This is what Gewirtz is saying here in Wrestler's Court. Bob nodded reflectively, apologized, and quietly sat down. Well, I'm kidding. I think the words he chose were, "You called me a fucking liar." No, this is not me cussing. This is Bob Holly now cussing. As was The Undertaker and Kane and everyone else before. It's not just me, man. It's not just the GOC. Well, that's me. My instinct was to deflect with humor, so I made the regretful decision to speak tongue-in-cheek about how great The Flash was. Despite everyone in the room needing to get ready for a 2-hour television show, seen in person by over 12,000 people and by millions more at home. I told 100 pissed off and visibly confused wrestlers the tale of a police scientist, Barry Allen, getting hit by a bolt of lightning and doused with chemicals, thus becoming the fastest man alive, The Flash. Hello? To the shock of no one but me, my dissertation on the origin of The Flash didn't go over with the group. Nor did my other attempt at humor, offering to call my mother to deny the other charges against me, that I invited Edge and Christian to my parents' house on Long Island. For a home-cooked meal. Not only was there that charge completely false, the likelihood of it ever happening was quickly dwindling as I could sense Edge and Christian giving the assembled a look as if to say, we're not with him. I was drowning badly, and each attempt to rectify the situation only made things worse. I believe the wrestling term is burying yourself. At that moment, I was a human shovel. Amidst the groans and blank looks of confusion during my admittedly fantastic Flash story, I could see one of my closest allies, Kurt Angle, shaking his head in anger. But not at me. Kurt could sense this was going too far. WWE producer Gerald Briscoe, took notice and quickly piped in. "It looks like Kurt Angle has something he wants to say," to quote Briscoe. Kurt did look like he had something to say, and I was more than ready for him to say it. Kurt and I had started with the company at roughly the same time. After winning a gold medal in the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta with a broken fucking neck, he made his WWE debut at Survivor Series 1999, my first pay-per-view with the company, Gewirtz stated. Together we collaborated on all his promos and backstage vignettes. I wrote a storyline where he, Edge and Christian become friends, something we called Team ECK. Edge, Christian, and Kurt, hello. He was probably my closest friend among the sea of wrestlers I was facing. If anyone would stand up for me and give me a much-needed shot of support, it would be our Olympic hero. Bradshaw asked, Kurt, do you have something you want to say on behalf of the defendant? Kurt rose up, opened his mouth for a brief second, then shook his head and sat down. In the grand scheme of things, risking permanent paralysis while wrestling with a broken neck was actually a less daunting act than saying something in my defense at this trial. Kurt later explained to me that if he had said something on my behalf, it would only have made things worse. For both me and him. The praise wouldn't have helped me, and he would have come off as a suck-up or a stooge. He was probably right, but in that moment, I felt a tremendous sense of betrayal. This was a slaughter, to be sure, but despite the wave of testimony against me, no one brought up a single thing against Edge and Christian since the reveal of their fake book, just to point that out. I was still hanging in there. I truly believed I had a puncher's chance of coming out of this. If not found innocent, at least somewhat still intact. Most of the charges levied against me made me look ignorant or even entitled, but not necessarily a bad person. Then Paul Heyman was asked to testify. Paul had joined the company just a few months earlier, and even though he was on the writing team, he was also on the Raw color commentator and a veteran. So it wasn't the same as Jamie. Paul was a very affable guy and easy to like, but at the time he had, say, a reputation, to put it mildly. He was the kind of like a Lando Calrissian of wrestling, if I said that correctly. Charming, a bit of a scoundrel, and depending on who you talk to, not exactly 100% trustworthy. We would butt heads many times over the course of our tenure. What a foreshadowing that is. But at this point, we had been pretty friendly. I even went with him to a small mall in Houston a week earlier to help pick out WrestleMania suit. His WrestleMania suit. Things went south when Paul came out of his outfit, and the salesman asked me, how do you think your dad looks? Paul is 8 years older than me. I tried to mentor this young man, take him under my wing, but when I told him it's important to shake hands with Funaki, he flat out stated, why do I need to do that? What does shaking Funaki's hand have to do with me succeeding in this business? Konnichiwa, bitches! Arigato from the Chaos-san. Oof. Any semblance of sympathy from the crowd jury completely vanished, and justifiably so. What an obnoxious thing for me to say. Funaki, a wrestler everyone loved, was not a main eventer, but by not shaking his hand, I came off as an elitist at best and a prick at worst. And it's confirmed when Sean, Perry, and everyone else was intimating earlier. The only issue was, it wasn't the truth. Though it wasn't a lie either. Paul did try to show me the ropes when he first came on. Paul Heyman, that is. Let's roll on here. One day, I passed Funaki in the hallway. Paul stressed how important it was to shake everyone's hand and how it would be detrimental to my job and reputation not to. I explained to him that I saw Funaki earlier in the day. And hello, did a respectful nod of recognition, and basically did everything but shake hands. So my point was, if you're saying hello and being respectful, why is a physical handshake so important? I was generally curious. Not that I had an issue shaking hands, but if you missed someone and still greeted them, wasn't that essentially the same? In the wrestling world, it wasn't. The shake is everything. Everything. And I don't mean when you're standing at the urinal and you're shaking it. And if you shake it more than 3 times, you're beating it. Just remember that. What I say, man, this is a parody. This, look, there's just one problem. Wrestler's court. The problem was questioning the method of your greeting versus thumbing your nose at someone because of their stature on the card is a pretty big discrepancy. Paul knew exactly what he was putting out there, and it was probably the most damning testimony anyone could give. It was double hurtful because Paul was acting as a mentor then, and I felt he took something I'd asked him about in private and used it as a way to eviscerate me in front of the entire company. In vintage Paul S., he later explained to me what I said was an earshot of Bubba Ray, aka Bully Ray, and Devon Dudley, who were in the vicinity, and therefore it was fair game to repeat it to everyone. Bradshaw saw my agitation and pounced immediately, asking, "Are you calling Mr. Heyman a liar?" This time I didn't hold back. Yeah, I said. At this point, two things happened. Stone Cold Steve Austin, arguably the biggest star in the history of the business, seated in the last row, had enough and walked out of the room. I was honestly surprised it took him this long. Just as Steve walked out, legendary backstage producer Pat Patterson walked in. Pat was completely oblivious to what was going on. In his 40-plus years at the WWE, he had been to his share of wrestlers' courts and knew it was pretty much a tongue-in-cheek, we review because we like you kind of affair, supposedly. Not this one. Pat could read a crowd and read an opponent, but he could not read a room. Bradshaw caught Pat coming in and asked him what he thought of the accused. Skipping Edge and Christian, Pat looked at me in his thick French-Canadian accent, which always sounded like Dracula mixed with Super Mario when he did it, or when anyone else tried to do it. He shouted, "That little shit, he fucks with my matches, changing the finishes." John asked pointedly, "Pat, how long have you been in this business?" "Over 40 years, Pat proudly replied. Bradshaw turned to me, and the defendant? I pathetically muttered, "A year and a half." And then Judge Undertaker, like he did to so many opponents, decided to mercifully end the suffering. He found all three of us guilty and asked if we had anything before he passed the sentence. Edge and Christian kept their self-deprecating humor alive with their final statement, though the room had now gotten decidedly more intense and uncomfortable, so it didn't quite land as well as the book routine earlier. Finally, the fun vibe of the room had gone from Anchorman to Apocalypse Now. Now it was time for my closing statement. For once, I didn't try to deflect by being sarcastic or excruciatingly unfunny. I stood up and spoke from the heart as I addressed the entire company. To quote, "I know what the perception is, but the truth is I'm not stuck up. I'm shy, and I know I need to get over that and do better. What I can honestly say is I'm writing for every single talent in this room. I know this is your livelihood. I know how important airtime is, and I know this show is better when everyone's involved. I care about and respect this business. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. I know I need to get out of my comfort zone and work with everyone when I'm on the road. And if you'll give me a chance, I know we can make something great." The reaction wasn't a standing ovation, but it wasn't eye-rolling scorn either. Hopefully they could tell that I did mean what I said. The truth is, I was trying to get as many people over as possible, even if I chose favorites to work with on TV. That's what they all do. You guys know that. It took me a while, but I realized it was actually an honor to be the first writer brought into Wrestler's Court. Have you guys picked up on this yet in the journey and the story of what I'm telling here? This was respect for the writer, who had never been in the fucking ring and experienced what these guys have, but is being accepted in the business. Think about it. Despite what I thought at the time, just being taken to court did mean that they liked me, or at the very least thought I was worth teaching a lesson to. That's the whole point of me reading this story here on Storytime with the GOC. If they didn't see any value in me, guys like Triple H, or Taker could have easily walked up to Vince and said, "This one's gotta go." I saw it happen to others on the writing team over the years. But thankfully, they saw enough in me to administer some needed tough love. That's the message here. It really wasn't about the flash action figure. Okay, for Bob Holly, it probably was. It was about a change in attitude, about opening up and making more of an effort to get to know and work with everyone instead of retreating to your safe space. I hope you guys are taking notes. That's why you come here, to learn things. Not opinions and views and thoughts, but actual fucking facts. So when you leave here, you can go have a educated a conversation, a response to the people you're involved in the IWC. Court was adjourned, and I have to admit I was pretty shaken up. I could hear Pat Patterson from the back saying, "What? What? No, I don't hate the kid. I thought he was ribbing." Pat actually came up to me right after to apologize, which he didn't have to do. That's just the type of guy Pat was. I responded by doing something I had never done before nor since, and smoked one of Pat's cigarettes right there on the spot. I got back to Vince's office a little shell-shocked and saw that Vince had a big smile on his face. "I heard court went well," Vince stated. Vince gave me one of his big booming laughs. A bad imitation on my part. Before I could regale him with stories, his expression immediately changed as he asked, "So where are we with the show? Back to business. Hello? McFly?" The following week, it was time to learn what our sentences were. Edge and Christian got their sentences lifted after buying Taker a giant Harley Davidson coffee table book, a DVD set of boxing legends, and an expensive bottle of liquor. No, liquor, I don't even know her. It was common knowledge to all but me, to quote Brian Gewirtz, the WWE writer, that sentences could be lightened or lifted based upon the bribes one gives the judge. Even if I'd known, it wouldn't have mattered. Whatever the punishment was, I was ready to accept it. It's called being humble, fans. I was about to understand why The Undertaker was so awesome. In my final testimony, I had said how much I respected the business. So Taker wanted me to write a 2,000-word essay on why I respected the business and also take Funaki and other talents I had supposedly dissed out for a drink. I can honestly say I had never written an essay with so much passion. I wrote about going with my dad to the Nassau Coliseum to see Rowdy Roddy Piper when I was a kid. I wrote about watching in awe over the amount of work it took the ring crew to actually set up the ring, the producers to put together a match, the wrestlers to absorb so much mental and physical punishment day after day, year after year, in the name of earning a living and giving the audiences something special to remember. I also pointed out how, despite looking like a trampoline on TV, in reality, the mat is hard. Listen to what I say on this channel, and you know that I know what the fuck I'm talking about. And the difference between this whole IWC, pro wrestling community, podcasters, whatever you want to call yourself, and people that are in the business. We don't take it lightly. I want you to think about that as we're almost 40 minutes in here on part 2. This is a shoot. Like really hard, the mats. Something I had learned firsthand. That's more foreshadowing. So come back for that. Taker read it, smiled, and ended up giving me an A. I should have left it at that, but of course I had to push my luck. Feeling emboldened, I sought out Hardcore Holly, who was still wearing his blue and pink ring gear. Now that a week had passed, I was hoping a mutual respect had developed. The good news is that it totally had. The bad news is that it didn't really kick until 15 years later after we had both left the company. "Hey, Bob," I said as I went to shake his hand. "I know it was kind of crazy last week, but I just wanted to ask, are we cool? Bob thought about it and shouted, "Fuck no!" and stormed off. That's not me cussing. That's not. I'm just relaying it. It wasn't ideal, but I considered the fact that there was no loud verbal threat to be a definite sign of progress. At 40 minutes in, fans, here on part 2, I can't thank you enough for being here. I'll be back with more content, with more story time, with more coverage of the WWE and AEW, with more Chaos Corner, with more classic clips, chaos clips, talk shows, personal issues and stuff from my own life and reality, and of course, dinner for 2 with my wife. I can't thank you guys enough. As I said, there's just one problem: Wrestler's Court. Brian Gewirtz. Go out and get it, and I'll continue to read from this. And I have also something that I'm going to be releasing soon here on Storytime, and I just want to update you. Tim Hornbaker, the last real world champion, the legacy of Nature Boy Ric Flair. We'll be doing the deep dive on this as well, coming up soon here on Chaos Corner. I'll say that to say this, because I tell it like it is. Don't you dare miss it. Let's go out with a little ukulele. Pling a modulate, Chaos Corner ukulele guardian. No? I'm trying. I'm still learning, man. Much love and respect.